The call came at 6:13 in the morning. 3 words. Just 3. And suddenly, 3 lives stopped. You need to come. That was all the nurse said. No explanation. No details. Just those words. And an hour later, 3 grown children sat in a hospital waiting room, wondering how they had somehow become strangers to the woman who spent her entire life loving them. Because what they were about to learn was something none of them saw coming. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. What is the biggest sacrifice someone has ever made for you that you only understood years later? Tell me in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how people from different parts of the world connect through these stories. And if you enjoy emotional stories with unexpected endings and life lessons that stay with you long after the video ends, subscribe and join us. Now let's continue. For most of her life, Helen Carter lived for other people. Not because she had an easy life, because she didn't. At 34, she lost her husband unexpectedly. One ordinary morning, life looked normal. By evening, nothing was normal anymore. And suddenly, she wasn't just grieving, she was raising 3 children alone. Daniel was 12, Emily was 9, Jacob had just turned 6. 3 children, 3 different personalities, 3 different fears, and one mother standing in the middle of it all, trying not to fall apart. People told her she was strong, but Helen never felt strong. She felt scared, tired, overwhelmed. But every morning, she still got up, because children still needed breakfast. School still started at 8. Bills still arrived. Life kept moving. So Helen moved with it. She worked mornings at a small bakery, cleaned offices during afternoons, and sometimes took extra work on weekends. Sleep became a luxury. New clothes became unnecessary. Vacations disappeared. But somehow, the children never noticed what she gave up, because Helen made sure they didn't. When Daniel wanted soccer shoes, he got soccer shoes. When Emily wanted art supplies, she got art supplies. When Jacob wanted birthday decorations, he got birthday decorations. And every time they asked, "Mom, what about you?" Helen smiled and said the same thing. "I'm fine. Always fine. Always smiling. Always carrying more than anyone realized." Years passed. Children grew. Dreams grew. Life changed. Daniel left for college. Emily moved across the country. Jacob started his own business. Helen stood in the doorway each time, waving goodbye with a smile. Proud. So incredibly proud. But after the cars disappeared down the road, the house always became quiet again. Too quiet, and slowly, without anyone noticing, Helen started eating dinner alone. Years passed quietly, faster than Helen expected. One day the house was filled with noise, school bags, laughter, arguments over television remotes, shoes left near the door. Then suddenly, it wasn't. Now there was only silence. Helen still woke up early, still made coffee every morning, still looked at 3 framed photographs sitting beside the window. Daniel at his graduation, Emily holding her first painting award, Jacob smiling beside his first car. She smiled every time she looked at them. Always smiled. But smiles can hide many things, because over time, the phone started ringing less. Not immediately, not intentionally, just slowly. Daniel became busy. Meetings, work trips, deadlines. Emily had her own family now. Children, responsibilities, a life of her own. Jacob's business was growing. Long hours, constant stress. And Helen understood, really understood. She never complained, never called twice if someone didn't answer, never said, "You never visit anymore." Instead, she said, "Take your time. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Always okay. Always fine." But one Tuesday afternoon, Helen sat alone at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. And for the first time in years, she looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. She slowly opened a small notebook. Inside were numbers, monthly bills, savings, expenses. Then at the bottom of the page, One sentence, written softly in blue ink. I don't want to become a burden. Helen stared at the words, longer than usual. Then she closed the notebook. The next morning, she put on her blue sweater, picked up her purse, and quietly drove somewhere none of her children knew about. She parked outside a building, sat in the car for several seconds, looking at the sign, then finally stepped out. The sign read, Horizon Living Community, a retirement community. Helen walked inside slowly, and before leaving that day, she signed papers that would quietly change everything. But nobody knew, not Daniel, not Emily, not Jacob, because Helen had already made a choice she planned to carry alone. Daniel noticed it first, not because he visited often, because he happened to stop by unexpectedly. His meeting had been canceled. He was driving nearby, and for some reason he thought, maybe I'll surprise Mom. So he bought flowers, simple yellow flowers, her favorite, and 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway, then immediately frowned, because something felt strange, very strange. The curtains were closed. That wasn't normal. Helen always opened them in the morning. Always. Her garden looked untouched too. Helen loved her garden. Even during busy weeks, she always found time for it. But now, some flowers had begun drooping. Leaves sat scattered near the walkway. Daniel slowly walked toward the front door. Knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. Still nothing. He pulled out his phone. Called her. Inside the house. He heard it ringing. Daniel froze, because his mother's phone was inside. But she wasn't. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Then he noticed something near the mailbox. A pile of letters. 3 days' worth. Helen never left mail outside. Never. Now Daniel felt uneasy. He quickly called Emily. Hey, she answered. Did Mom tell you she was going somewhere? Silence. No. Then why? 20 minutes later, Jacob arrived too. Now all three stood outside the house. The same house where they grew up. But somehow, it suddenly felt unfamiliar. Daniel used the emergency key hidden beneath a flower pot. The exact same place it had always been. Slowly, they stepped inside, and immediately noticed something. The house looked clean. Too clean. No dishes, no laundry basket, no newspaper beside her chair. Everything looked organized, planned, as if someone had prepared to leave. Emily walked into the kitchen, stopped, and stared. On the table sat a single envelope, 3 words written on the front, for my children. Nobody moved, because suddenly, all three felt the same thing. Fear. Nobody moved. Not Daniel. Not Emily. Not Jacob. The envelope sat in the center of the table. Quiet. Ordinary. But somehow, it felt heavier than anything in the room. Daniel slowly reached for it. His hands were shaking. Open it, Jacob whispered. Emily looked down, suddenly afraid of what they might find. Because deep inside, all three of them were thinking the same thing. Why didn't she tell us? Daniel opened the envelope carefully, pulled out several folded pages. Then he started reading. My dear children. Immediately, Emily covered her mouth, because the moment they heard those words, it felt like hearing their mother's voice. If you are reading this, then you're probably standing in the kitchen. Daniel is probably pretending not to worry. Daniel swallowed hard. Emily is probably already crying. Emily looked away, because she was. And Jacob is pretending he understands everything. Jacob stared at the floor. Silence. Daniel continued reading. First, I need you to know something important. I am okay. All three immediately exhaled. For the first time since entering the house, they breathed. But Daniel kept reading, and then his expression changed. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering why I didn't tell you. The truth is, I tried many times. Daniel froze. Slowly, his eyes moved across the page. But every time I called, someone was busy. Silence. No one looked at each other. Daniel had meetings. Emily had responsibilities. Jacob had work. And I understood. I always understood. Emily's eyes filled instantly. Because suddenly, small memories started returning. I'll call you back, Mom. I'm in a hurry. Can I talk later? Little moments. Little words. Words they forgot minutes later. But apparently, their mother remembered them. Daniel kept reading quietly. I didn't want anyone feeling guilty. I didn't want to become something you had to manage. So I made a decision. The room suddenly felt cold. Daniel looked at the next line, then stopped breathing. Because written there were words none of them expected. 3 months ago, I moved out. Silence. Absolute silence. Emily looked up immediately. What? Jacob stared. Daniel read it again, slowly. 3 months ago, I moved out. I moved somewhere I thought would be easier for everyone. Emily shook her head. No, no. Because suddenly, they realized something horrifying. For 3 whole months, their mother had been gone, and none of them noticed. Nobody spoke. Not for several seconds. 3 months. 3 whole months. Their mother had moved away. And somehow, none of them knew. None of them noticed. Emily slowly sat down. No, she whispered. There has to be some mistake. Jacob grabbed the letter from Daniel's hands. Read it himself. Then read it again, because sometimes your mind refuses to accept words your heart already understands. But the words never changed. 3 months. Daniel suddenly stood up. No. He grabbed his phone immediately. I'm calling her. He pressed her number, held the phone to his ear. Ring. Ring, then voicemail. Hi, you've reached Helen. Daniel ended the call. Called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. His breathing became heavier, because now fear was slowly replacing confusion. Emily looked back at the letter. There has to be more. Daniel nodded. Slowly he turned the page, and found another note attached underneath. A card. Small. Cream-colored. At the top were words printed in blue letters. Horizon Living Community Silence. Jacob stared. Emily stared. Daniel looked like someone had just punched the air from his lungs. Because suddenly, everything connected. The strange distance, the organized house, the missing phone calls. Their mother didn't go on vacation. She didn't move closer to friends. She moved into a retirement community. Alone. Emily's eyes immediately filled with tears. No, Mom would never do that. Jacob looked down. But deep down, all three knew something painful. Their mother absolutely would. Because Helen spent her entire life doing one thing, making things easier for everyone else, even if it made things harder for herself. Daniel grabbed his keys. We're going. 25 minutes later, their car pulled into Horizon Living Community. Beautiful gardens, quiet pathways, people sitting outside talking. Peaceful, too peaceful. Daniel practically ran inside. Emily and Jacob followed behind. The woman at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? Daniel swallowed hard. We're looking for Helen Carter. The woman smiled softly. Then suddenly her expression changed. Just slightly, but enough. Enough for all three of them to notice. And in that moment, fear returned instantly. Because she quietly said, "Oh, you must be her children." Daniel stared at the woman behind the desk. Emily stopped walking. Jacob's face went pale. Because it wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. You must be her children. Like she recognized them. Like she had been expecting them. Daniel stepped closer immediately. Where's our mother? The woman looked at them carefully, then smiled softly. She's okay. All three exhaled at once. For a second, their hearts started beating normally again. But only for a second. Because then the woman added, she's in the garden. Garden. Daniel frowned. Garden. How could she just be sitting in a garden after disappearing for 3 months? How could she be okay? How could she leave without saying anything? Questions flooded his mind. The woman pointed outside, through large glass doors, and then they saw her, Helen, sitting on a wooden bench near flowers. holding a cup of tea, smiling while talking to an older woman beside her. She looked peaceful, very peaceful, and somehow that hurt even more, because for the first time, they realized something. She wasn't sitting alone, not waiting by a window, not staring at her phone, not wondering if someone would call. She looked happy. Emily's eyes immediately filled. "Mom!" Helen turned, and instantly froze. The cup almost slipped from her hands. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Helen slowly stood up. "Daniel? Emily? Jacob?" Daniel walked toward her, not fast, slowly, because suddenly he felt ashamed. Ashamed of every missed call, every canceled visit, every Spence. "I'll call you later." Emily reached her first, wrapped her arms around her, started crying immediately. Jacob hugged her too, and for a moment, all four of them stood there silently. Then Helen softly asked, "How did you find me?" Daniel looked down. The letter. Helen became quiet, very quiet. Then she looked away and whispered words none of them were ready to hear. "I didn't want to interrupt your lives anymore." Silence. Emily immediately pulled back. "What?" Helen smiled sadly. "I saw how busy everyone became. You all had families. You had work. You had responsibilities. So I thought—" She paused, then looked down. Maybe I had already had my turn. Daniel felt tears hit his face immediately, because suddenly he understood something painful. Their mother never left because she stopped loving them. She left because she thought she was making life easier for them. Nobody spoke. Not Daniel, not Emily, not Jacob. Because Helen's words sat there quietly between them. Maybe I had already had my turn. Daniel felt tears building again. Because all his life, his mother had been the one holding everyone together. Birthdays, school events, late-night phone calls. Advice, encouragement, support. She had been there for everything. And somehow, they had slowly started believing she would always be there. Always waiting, always understanding, always fine. Helen looked toward the garden. "I wasn't angry," she said softly. "I never blamed any of you." Emily wiped tears from her face. "Mom," Helen smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. You built lives. That's what parents want." Then she paused. But one day, the house became very quiet. Daniel looked down immediately, because suddenly, he remembered all the times he ignored her calls. "I'll call later. Busy right now. Next weekend, Mom. Next weekend. Next weekend. Next weekend." Until suddenly, many weekends had passed. Helen reached into her purse, pulled out a folded paper, and handed it to Daniel. His hands shook as he opened it. Then his face changed immediately. Because it wasn't paperwork. Not bills. Not financial documents. It was a waiting list application. At the top it said, "Long-term residence request." Emily stared. Jacob stared. Daniel looked up slowly. "Mom," his voice broke. "You were planning to stay here permanently?" Helen lowered her eyes, then quietly nodded. Silence. Absolute silence. Because suddenly, all three children understood the final choice she had made. She wasn't planning to come back home. She had packed away her photographs, organized her house, written letters, prepared everything. Not because she wanted distance, because she thought she had become one, a burden. Emily immediately started crying. "No." Jacob shook his head. "No, Mom." Daniel dropped the paper, then knelt beside her, for the first time since he was a child, and looked directly into her eyes. "You carried us for years. When Dad was gone, when things were hard, when nobody else could," tears rolled down his face. "And we made you feel alone." Helen's eyes immediately filled, because those weren't words she expected to hear. Not today, maybe not ever. Jacob sat beside her. Emily held her hand, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. Because some moments don't need words. 3 months later, Helen's house wasn't quiet anymore. Daniel visited every Tuesday. Emily brought the grandchildren every weekend. Jacob called every evening. Not because they felt guilty, because they finally understood something. Love isn't only sacrifice. Love is presence, showing up, before it's too late. Moral of the story. Sometimes the people who give the most ask for the least. And because they ask for so little, we sometimes forget they need love too. Don't wait until someone quietly disappears from your life to notice what they meant to you. Because the greatest gift we can give people isn't money. It isn't presents. It isn't words. It's presence. When was the last time you called someone who always checks on you? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end.